Welcome all to today's session, Hands-On Learning. We're super excited to have Miss Tracy Atkins with us today. I've known Tracy now for quite some time, and I've always been very impressed with her ability to just be so creative and engaging with her students. So I'm glad to welcome you, Tracy. And I'm going to turn it over to you and let you share with us today about hands-on learning. I'm going to mute myself and I'll come back on at the conclusion of today's webinar.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Pam. Okay, my name is Tracy Atkins, and I'm currently teaching third grade at Horizon Elementary in Madison, Alabama. I've been teaching for 18 years. I've taught pre-K, kindergarten, ESL, Title I grade, and I'm now teaching third grade with my class last year. So I actually looped up with my second graders to third grade. So my love is definitely early childhood. And today I am speaking on hands-on learning. And you see the question here on the screen that says, why do we need hands-on learning? Well, as I was thinking about this, I did go and look in Webster, and Webster defines hands-on as involving or allowing use of or touching with hands. Now, my classroom is always a very busy classroom, and sometimes I'll just kind of sit and just watch what my students are doing, and I always notice that the one thing they love to do is they love to move. This is the same for students that are pre-K through adults. And it's because we learn by doing. This quote from Benjamin Franklin down at the bottom completely sums up hands-on learning for me. And it is, tell me and I forget, teach and I remember, involve me and I learn. When I am involved in hands-on with something that is new to me or challenging to me, when I'm the learner myself, the topic or concept that I'm trying to learn really sticks with me so much better when I can actually do part of the process instead of just sitting and listening to it. Or even sometimes if it's a harder type or a newer concept, if I'm just reading it, if I can somehow make it hands-on, or if someone can make it hands-on for me, the content definitely sticks within me so much better. So I'm going to be showing a unit today that I've created called Me on the Map. And this is actually a unit that I will be doing soon in my own classroom. So I'm very excited for my third graders to have this hands-on experience. I have done parts of this unit before with some other grades, but today I'm kind of just going to focus in on what my plan is for my current classroom. So one way to begin your hands-on learning experience is by creating a KWL anchor chart. And when you're doing this, you just begin brainstorming what your students know about and what they wonder about a topic before you begin reading a story about that topic or teaching about that topic. So I've created here a KWL on maps. And what I plan to do in my classroom is this would actually be up on a large chart tablet. And I will pass out sticky notes for my kids to write on. And they will each write something that they know about maps on the sticky note. Once they have something written, they will actually put that sticky note in the proper section on the KWL chart under the K. And then we'll come together and discuss what we all know. And then next, we will do a brainstorm on what we wonder about maps. And each student will get another sticky note of a different color and write down something that they wonder about maps. They will then take that sticky note and place it on the anchor chart, and we will discuss what we wonder about maps. Now, depending on my class, I may just read out some of these sticky notes. I may actually have the students read their own sticky note. And since I do have third graders, they will be reading their own sticky note and telling what it was that they wanted to know and what it was that they wonder. And then once you concluded your lesson on maps, however long that might be, if it's one day, if it's a week, if it's 2 weeks, you would reference back to this anchor chart and you would just ask students What have you learned about maps? And at that time, I will give my students another color of a sticky note, and they will place that in the section labeled with the L. So I like to pass out sticky notes so that each of my students can respond and be active in each section of the anchor chart. The different colors just work great for me and for my students so that they can see, oh, this is the K section, here's the W section, here's the L section. I don't feel like you have to have sticky notes. You could also just have students write directly on the anchor chart, and you could use sticky notes of all the same color. So it's really whatever you have. I plan to use the book Me on the Map by Joan Sweeney as a hook and to introduce students to their place in the world. And you can find the hard copy of this book in your library or on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Or if you can't find a hard copy, you could just find a read aloud version online to present to your class. This book will actually pique your students' interest about maps. And after hearing the story, your students will truly begin putting themselves on the map. So I've read this story to pre-K, I've read it to kindergarten, and I've read it to second grade students. And one thing I think that it's important to remember is that it's okay for kids to hear stories more than once from a teacher. Students that are in pre-K are going to take away something completely different from this book than students in second or third grade. So don't be scared to take a book like this one, for instance, and read it again, even if you know that the students may have had that book in the year past. I know my students have already had this book, but we're going to reread it, and I feel like that they're at a different place in their learning, so they're going to probably take away something different from this story. There's a part in this book that is my favorite part, and it says, in room, in houses, on streets, in towns and countries all over the world, everybody has their own special place on the map. And I actually plan to extend this lesson into a character education lesson using this thought. My school is a Leader in Me school, so we are really big on just building leaders within every one of our students and teaching them things within themselves of knowing that, you know, no matter where we are, we're someone special. And so that's kind of how I'll take that and tie in my Leader in Me with that as well. So the next thing that I will do is I will create a visual for my class, which I've already created this. This is my set of nesting boxes here that you'll see. And nesting boxes will create just a hands-on type visual for your students. Students can actually see how the world gets bigger with their house being the smallest, and then their street and town, state, country, continent, and then their world. So this will really help with the concept that a state is bigger than a city and a country is bigger than a state. Students, I know my own second graders last year had a very hard time visualizing just that, hey, we live in Alabama, but the United States is actually bigger than Alabama. And so I think that this visual will just really help them know their place in the world, and place is inside of another place. So after students have had a chance to see and actually manipulate the nesting boxes, they will be able to make a graphic organizer that goes along with the visual activity. So this will help students glue the concept of where I am in the world into their brain. This is a graphic organizer that goes along with a unit that I purchased off of Teachers Pay Teachers. And this actually goes along with the terminology inside of the book, Me on the Map. So I chose this one here that you see with me being at the bottom and my planet being at the top. And there's different ones that were inside this pack, but this was the one that worked for me. And so my students would use this kind of as just a place for them to take their thoughts and put them down. This would not be a place where I wanted them to draw any pictures or anything like that. I want them to be able to do this kind of quickly. And so down at the bottom, they would be putting their name, and my town, they would be putting Madison, Alabama. And so You'll see on the right, I referenced that this was a resource from Clutter-Free Classroom that is on Teachers Pay Teachers. I will also use this as a quick check just to see if my students understand the concept of where they are in the world, or, do I need to go back and reteach something? Or do I have a few students that I need to go back and actually spend a little more time with, helping them understand that concept of, their state is inside of their country and their country is bigger than their state. So next you'll see nesting cups, and this is how I plan to make the graphic organizer hands-on, and it's by letting my students create their own nesting cups. I think this will really help students see the progression of the world, and there's several different ways in which you could do this. I think that these nesting cups would be simple and inexpensive. You could use paper cups, or you could use foam cups. You can ask parents to send in donations of cups, or you could just purchase those at Dollar Tree, or you could go to Sam's and probably get a bigger quantity for the amount of money that you pay. And I actually found these free cup labels on Teachers Pay Teachers also, and they are from Chrissy Rissmiller, who has Undercover Classroom. So it's a great resource. You can find that on Teachers Pay Teachers, and her resource is editable. So you can actually go on there and put in your state and change things for where you're living in the world. Now, my students love when I can connect a video and when I can connect music to whatever we are learning. So I would say don't be scared to sing in the classroom, and don't be scared to take a video and connect it to whatever you're learning. And this is a continent song that I'll be using in my classroom, and it may seem kind of elementary or lower elementary to some, but I know that my third graders will love it. I know that it's catchy, and I know they'll get their tune inside, that tune inside their brain, and they'll go home singing this. And I think that it's something that will kind of leave a lasting impression, and they'll be singing it much longer than just third grade. So you can find music and videos on YouTube. You can also go to Pinterest and find all kinds of awesome resources. So I would encourage you to try those resources. There's so many resources for this activity. You can find free ideas on Pinterest. You can buy resources already made on Teachers Pay Teachers. This picture is from the Good Life Blogspot by Lindsay. And in this picture, you see that this teacher just chose to give her students a world map where they filled in the continents, they colored it, she had taken a picture of them, and they were holding themselves up. And then she simplified by just having her students make their own flat book, and they actually wrote in the titles there themselves. There's other things you could do. Students could draw themselves. You can take a picture like this teacher did. Students can create their own world. You can give them a copy of the world like this teacher did. Students can make a world using a coffee filter, and that's actually what I'll be doing. I love the coffee filter, and it's extremely hands-on. Students take a coffee filter and use blue and green dot markers, or if you don't have dot markers, you could just use regular blue and green markers. And they put color on the coffee filter. It does not even have to all be completely colored in. And once they've done that, then they take that and they wad it up. And you can either let them take a spray bottle and spray a little bit of water on the coffee filter, or you could take the spray bottle yourself and spray a little bit on the coffee filter. The students then get to take their hands and wad that coffee filter all up and kind of mush those colors all around. And then the colors just bleed into the coffee filter. And when they open it up, they have these really great colors of blue and green that look like an earth. So I've done this with all of my previous grades, and my students love this. So then they would just take that. They would have to let it dry, so it wouldn't be something that you could just immediately put on the paper. And then my students would label their book and illustrate their place in the world. They would actually go back to their graphic organizer and their stacking cups as a resource to illustrate and label the book. As you're learning about maps, globes, states, continents, your students can actually make a pumpkin globe. Before doing this, you would need to teach the equator, the prime meridian, hemispheres, oceans, and continents. This is the beginning of my pumpkin globe on the left. This is something that I will have my students do. They're all going to bring in a pumpkin so that we can all make our very own pumpkin globe. They will actually take a Sharpie marker and mark the equator, as you see I've done on mine, and the prime meridian. And then I will actually give them slips of paper for marking the hemispheres. And that part will get glued on in another step. So students will then color their continents, and they will use Mod Podge to glue their continents onto the pumpkin globe in the correct place on the pumpkin. And then they will also glue on labels for the oceans. Now you could also paint your pumpkins. As you see, I found a source here from 3rd grade Thinkers 8, where she actually took her pumpkins, and it looks like they maybe used even smaller pumpkins, and they actually painted them blue. Just due to time issues, I will not be doing the painting blue. We'll be doing the orange, but the blue one is really cute, and I think the students would see, oh, here's the oceans, you know, here's the green part of the earth. So also, if you did not want to do this as an individual activity, you could have students work in groups and synergize to make just a few globes. You could ask for just a donation of 4 or 5 pumpkins, and then they could work on their team building skills to create those globes and do that. I know in my classroom, I will have a couple of parent volunteers come in and help me, just because I know my parents really well this year. And so I know that I have 2 that can come in and just really do what I ask them to do and help me with that pumpkin globe. But I feel like that this is something that if you have explicit step-by-step instructions, your students could do that, and you could do it with them without a lot of help from someone else. You could also have it at a station and just work with a few at a time doing it. There's so many things that you could do to extend this unit. I plan to have my students choose a place on the map that they would like to visit. They will then write a story about their adventure. They will also research their place and find facts out about it. I will have my students present their place to the class so that we can work on our speaking and listening standards. So that's just something I plan on doing later. That will be a process. That will be something that we're having to really spend some time on, and it'll probably take about 4 weeks for us to finish that within my classroom. So hands-on learning will keep your students engaged and loving what they are learning. Here's some other ideas of ways to make other topics hands-on in your classroom. I just recently taught my students how to make the little fortune teller, and they are loving this folding activity, and it's something that we're using for review type activities. You'll see that I referenced a fortune teller here on the screen, and it just kind of gives you a little bit of insight of how you could use one to review places with geography. I've also before had a mock trial inside my classroom. You'll see I have mock trial listed there. And I've had an attorney come in that was actually a parent to one of my students, and we staged a mock trial within the class. This was something that at first I thought, oh my goodness, my students won't be able to do that. It'll be way too higher level for them, or higher of a grade level for them. But it was presented in a way where my students loved every single bit of it. They really got into, we were having a court case. They got into the fact that someone was the judge and there were jurors and there was a problem, and that had been brought before the court, and the jurors actually got to vote on what the verdict was. So it was a really great experience for them to just see that court system in action. Something else that I've listed here that I've done in my classroom is the Wax Museum. That could also be living statues. So I'm going to reference the next slide here. And you see some pictures from my wax museum that we did in our classroom. So we did a 6-week research project on a historical figure. And each student learned how to research, write, and present, and just take pride in history. So you'll see here some examples of our research, and I'm going to kind of just tell you briefly the process that we used for this. So my students used their parents a little to do this, and then we also used time within the classroom to do this. And so each child had to choose a person that they would be interested in researching, and this is the part that they took home to their families. And they actually had to name someone that they felt like was leaving a legacy or had left a legacy within the world. And that was who they brought back to me. And then they knew that I was making the ultimate decision of who they were able to pick. So if I had a student bring in someone that was not a legacy leaver, they knew that they would not be able to choose that person. So they went home, they took this home, they chose someone with their families. The parents knew what was going to be expected of them. In class, we were going to research this person that they had chosen and answer some questions about that person. At home, they were going to make a visual display. And so you'll see here some students made a visual display that was just on a presentation board. You'll see also that I had one student that did a shoebox diorama. So they were given some options of things that they could do. The other thing that they had to do with their family was actually come up with a costume, so that on the day that we presented these to the school, they were able to actually be in that costume. So I'll show here another slide. Oh, sorry. Oh, I think I went back too far. There we are. So I thought I had one more, but I do not. You'll notice some little buttons there. The students were to actually stay completely straight and as if they were a wax museum figure until someone pushed their button. We had every parent come in and actually do this with our classroom. So it was really fun. The kids were very excited about their family showing up. And then we had several classrooms come in and also listen to the presentations. So this was something that was so much fun that even though we did it last year, we'll be doing it again this year within my classroom. And I was able to actually incorporate so many standards with using this wax museum project. Inside my classroom, we've also done a study of a country. So we did a study of China. This was a research project that was actually a really huge study on China. It was something that we worked on over the course of about a semester. So when I presented this to my students, we actually got together, brainstormed, and planned what we already knew about China and what we wanted to learn about China. So the kids actually became true geniuses on this country. And then at the very end, when we had every single thing up inside our classroom, we presented it to the entire school. So you'll see here that some students had been to China, so they actually had artifacts come in. We had studied about the Chinese New Year. We actually did some group work and studied animals that were in China. You'll see here that the red panda was one of the animals. My students absolutely loved the red panda. They loved doing this. They loved being able to put art into action while they were presenting and learning about their animals. You'll see that we tied in some figures from China, Confucius. Again, you'll see some things there where I was able to tie in our character education, Leader in Me, with being proactive within our classroom and just how Confucius was proactive. You'll see that we did a project here where students made dragons. That was actually a home project where they took that home and they made dragons with their family. This was something that I was a little nervous about. I thought, oh, I don't know if everybody will make one. I don't know if we'll all have one. but every student actually came back to school with a dragon. They had about 3 weeks to work on that, and they were very excited about showing those to the school. So I would say don't be scared to make your learning hands-on. As you can see from some of the pictures, I love art and I love music, and I love incorporating it in any way that I can within my classroom. I feel like it's much easier to incorporate it when I'm doing a unit that I make really big. And while my class is learning about history, geography, or government, I'm able to incorporate other subjects that I might not always get to focus on, especially that writing and that character education and that art component. So I just want to say thank you so much for listening today to my webinar. I hope that you found at least one way to make something in your classroom more hands-on. I hope that you were inspired in some way to also try something new.
Thank you, Tracy.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Tracy. Fabulous. Let me just see if anybody has any questions or comments they'd like to pose. If you do, please use the chat feature on the right-hand side on your dashboard there, and we'll be glad to take your questions. Tracy, my first question is just going to be kind of the obvious one is, I love everything that you've done here. I would say, what are the challenges in doing this kind of hands-on learning with your students?
I would say the biggest challenge is time, and it's the preparing, because doing these big units, doing things like that, it is a lot of hard work. One thing that helps me is that I have a teaching friend that we do a lot of these big type things together. So we get together, we plan it together, we work on things together. And then to me, when I see the students actually having so much fun and them being so engaged with whatever we're doing, that kind of drives me to want to do it more. So when I see, that light come on and they're excited about their learning, that makes me just want to do that more with the kids. So that's kind of my driving force. But I will say it's a lot of hard work. If you are blessed enough to be in the same grade more than 1 year, then you can take a lot of this work that you've done in 1 year and transfer it into the next year. So that would be something that would be, hey, I'm working hard for this year, but next year I'm going to already have all of this together.
Oh, good. Good advice too there, Tracy. Thank you. Well, we're certainly glad that everybody was able to jump on with us this afternoon, and I will be sending all of you a link for the recording, and I'd just be glad for you to share it out with your colleagues. As you close out today, you'll be prompted to take a short, I think it's about a 4 or 5 question survey regarding our webinar. If you would do that, we certainly would appreciate it. Tracy, thanks for being on today, and I hope you'll come back and do another webinar with us in the near future.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pam.